tightest Senate race in the country. I won by 19,000 votes out of 5.6 million voters. It was tight, okay? It was a cost of living election, period. And voters voted for whoever they thought was going to put more money in their pockets. He successfully won that campaign because he said he was going to lower costs. And I challenge anyone to tell me what part of your budget has gone down and not gone, in some cases, up precipitously.
That was Senator Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan describing the bait and switch that voters have endured when it comes to Donald Trump's campaign season economic promises. And as Trump's economic agenda starts to actually impact people's lives, their budgets, the cost of everything, the backlash to Donald Trump is showing up bigly in his polling. On Donald Trump's handling of jobs in the economy, 53% of all Americans disapprove, compared to 38% who like what they're seeing. When it comes to his handling of inflation and prices, 62% of all Americans disapprove, just 32% approve. And with the passage of Donald Trump's disastrous domestic spending bill, millions of Americans are set to lose access to health care and food assistance. It all leads to this: an overall approval rating of just 41% less than 9 months into his presidency, with 55% of Americans disapproving of Donald Trump. Joining us on set, Senator Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I love the speech today when you described your prep for this group. You went and talked to your constituents. Explain.
Yeah, well, I was giving a foreign policy speech, which is my background, right? I'm a former CIA officer and Pentagon official. But I did something that I would have never thought of doing, frankly, 15 years ago, which is asking regular Michiganders what they expect out of their government when it comes to keeping them safe and what they feel like are the biggest threats to their own security. And we had a bunch of town halls in Michigan on this and in different parts of the state. And people will tell you where they think the government is doing well and where it's not doing well. It was clear from the beginning. We couldn't talk for 5 minutes without people talking about the economic security, the fact that they don't feel confident in their ability to succeed, their kids' ability to succeed. They're stressed about it, the tariffs, the economy, jobs. They were deeply concerned about technology in our lives, right? Just they don't know how to think about social media for their kids. They don't know how to think about AI, artificial intelligence. They don't know how to think about these cyber attacks that are, everyone had a personal story about being ransomed or being hacked. So that really prompted me to think differently about national security. And it's not just, planes and tanks and war over there. It's really about economic issues here, tech issues here, and how American citizens are now on the front lines because of all these things happening in our phones and in our lives.
I think when people talk about your place in our politics and your place in the Democratic Party, they focus on the message. And I know from being in communications that the message is like the tail, right? It comes from the substance. And it sounds like what you're articulating is that our politics have always put the national security people, conversations, policy making, and messengers over here, and the economic people, policies, messages, and communications over here. And what people experience is that they're all one thing. You feel unsafe if your job is at risk. You feel unsafe if every time you go to buy something that you're thinking about, but it's a big purchase, it's more expensive on Amazon. Yeah. You feel unsafe if your kid comes home and says, is this real? And it's a video, and you actually don't know if it's AI or if it's real. That makes people feel unsafe. What are the answers to those problems?
Yeah, well, certainly, there is, to me, the existential issue facing the country is that we have a shrinking middle class. Right? I think people don't understand that when you cannot provide for your kids what was provided to you, you feel shame, you feel anger, and you feel like you want to blame someone. And you blame someone who doesn't look like you or talk like you or pray like you. And if you want to understand this moment in our country's history, this authoritarian moment, this moment where we're turned inward on each other, I truly believe it's because people feel desperate and they feel like they can't live the American dream. So let's start there. That's the existential threat. It's not something coming from abroad. It's not a missile. It's not a weapon. It's the shrinking middle class in a democracy. Number two, to me, we got to actually address some of the major economic issues that people are complaining about. Housing. What is more American than buying your first house, right? And to me, the president has been declaring an emergency on every issue he can think of. He hasn't declared a housing emergency. He's not using the bully pulpit to actually clear out some of those regulations, make it easier to build the 4 million units of housing that we're short, right? To me, there's real concrete things we can do to bring back that American dream. Today, when I was talking about national security, it was about also, by the way, economic warfare is happening right now between us and particularly the Chinese. You know, we take things for granted that we're a leader in the world, that the whole world runs on the US dollar. I got to tell you, China doesn't want that. China wants countries peeling off and using their currency instead of our currency. So how do we make sure going into the future we don't lose that strong ability to run the global system on the dollar? How do we make sure that if the Chinese are weaponizing our supply chains, that we do something about that? You know, if we make cars in Michigan, if China has a veto and can decide you're not going to get that you know, metal, you're not going to get that part, you're not going to get that chip. Well, they've got a veto on our economy. We need industrial policy that actually ensures we are not allowing China to do that, and we're hanging out with our friends and saying we're not going to let that happen. We need to make things in America, right? And not everything. I tell people, like, we're never again going to make ladies' razors and Rubik's Cubes in the United States of America. Fine. But chips, right? Making certain pharmaceuticals so that we never have to depend on another country. That's what I mean by industrial policy. So there's a number of things that we can do. I just think, you know, every single day Donald Trump is doing 10 things that grab our attention. Every single day he's distracting us purposely so that we're not paying attention to the fact that costs are going up and not down in people's lives. Every single day, he's coming up with press conferences and announcements so that we're not talking about the price of health care that's about to jump for every single American. We need to cut through that and remember that we have to offer a positive, affirmative vision of what we want to do. And for me, it is about the middle class, making things in America, and jobs.
I have to sneak in a quick break. To your point about all the other things happening, I want to ask you about tactics, you know, how you nod to the 10 things and then bring people back to what you called today an existential threat, these threats to the middle class.
Yeah.
Take a quick break for that first. We'll be right back. We're back with Senator Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan. I want to come back to your use of existential, about the threat to people's economic security, about using words that are usually associated with foreign policy threats. It seems intended to do what you mentioned before the break, divert our attention back to what matters, the real threats, and away from Donald Trump's 10 insane things every day.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, first of all, I think truly people feel it, right, back home. So it's not hard to capture people's imagination when they are struggling. And then secondly, I think for the media and for Washington and for the people who really follow news every single day, you got to break out of this insane saturation that's going on. And I think using, frankly, a national security and military terms to talk about our economy is a way to break people out of that sort of exhaustion that they're in. But I really feel it in my bones. And this is, as someone who lives in a small community where the majority of people are not doing as well as their parents, I also think it's the issue that unites generations. You've got a lot of working people back home who feel like they can't get ahead. The generation, you know, that's graduating college right now doesn't feel like they'll ever live the life that their parents lived. So it's a uniting factor among so many Americans. And while there's a ton of issues out there, I think a public servant's job is to speak to the broadest group of people that you represent.
Well, right. I mean, like the very essence of broadcasting, right, are the things that affect everybody, and the economy affects everybody. And Trump can't carve out the people that voted for him and protect them from price increases because of his tariffs or because of the economic instability he's creating. How do you explain? I mean, there are no policies that Trump champions that help any of the people you're talking about. People for whom costs and the lack of any sort of path toward home ownership or reality, there is nothing on the Republican agenda to help them. How do you explain the pull that Trump's MAGA GOP has Is it all culture, on working class voters, if there's not any policy that helps them?
I mean, I think, look, I live in a Trump voting town. I've never won my town. I've never won my precinct. I've never won my neighbors. I took my town supervisor as my +1 to Trump's inauguration because he's such a fan. So I live in that world, and I think a lot of people will say the jury's out, right? We don't know. He's got a grand plan. Right?
On the economy, they think?
Yeah, there's still.
What do they think he's going to do?
I think that they voted for him because they felt like he was going to pull a rabbit out of a hat and put more money in their pocket, and they're still holding on. Now, going back to school was a tough moment, right? That's when families are spending kind of more money. I heard a lot of grumbling, like price of clothes, price of school supplies. Like it was harder to get kids back to school. I think Christmas is going to be tough, which is painful. Right?
Because Trump told us one doll, not three.
Right. Well, but I think there is no doubt about it that people are going to be feeling the pain, particularly on health care this fall. Everyone's going to get a letter, right? They're going to get a letter that says your insurance is going up on January 1st by 10 to 20%. We're already seeing that in Michigan. And I don't know a single American who feels like we're paying too little for health care.
Or getting too much.
The system is not well.
Yeah.
And so I just think that people will, I think, see the light because they know their own pocketbooks. They may not know fancy policy in Washington. They may not follow the news every day. They know their pocketbooks. They know how much they spend and save every month. And that will catch up with him. But it's not enough, right? I don't think it's enough for Democrats to just wait for things to happen, right? That's not service. You have to have an offensive plan. You have to present more ideas. And so I've been trying to shove some ideas out there. They can be good, bad, or otherwise, but we need some thought leadership on how to play offense and not just defense, because you can't just point at him, say he's bad, and think that that's a political campaign.
How are those conversations among your Democratic colleagues? Do you feel like people are feeling more like they're on offense?
I think that there's no hiding the fact that we've been on our heels since Trump was elected. And that's not a surprise to any of your viewers. I think that there is a real debate going on, if I can be honest, behind closed doors. It's no longer the debate that was kind of progressives versus moderates, right? And after Trump was first elected, it's like, what's the future of the party? Is it progressive or a moderate vision? I think the debate now is really how you answer the following question. Do you believe that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy as we know it? Or do you believe that his second term is bad, but like his first term, will survive it if we just wait it out?
What's the answer?
Number one. I'm on team one.
Yeah.
And that debate is playing out among lawmakers and among elected leaders and political leaders in the Democratic Party.
And business leaders and
nonprofit.
Civic, yeah.
And that, to me, I don't know a team that can win in sports without an offense.
Yeah. Oh, so interesting. Will you come back?
Of course, always.
Senator Alyssa Slotkin, thank you so much for being here.
Of course.